Okay, welcome to this panel on the AI edge. So we're today for today's session, we're looking at how artificial intelligence is shaping the world, but then also how it's going to be looking in the future. We're going to be exploring some inflection points as well as human biases in algorithms and whether or not we can kind of take out the humanity from the machines in order to make them better. I am John Artman, the moderator for the panel today. I am the technology editor at the South China Morning Post, coming to you from Hong Kong. And it's my pleasure to be joined on the panel today by Hiroaki Kitano, President and CEO of the Sony Computer Science Laboratories, David Liu, founder and CEO of Plus, Wanli Min, founder and CEO of North Summit Capital, as well as Vivian Ming, founder and executive chair at Socos Labs. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Just looking at the experience and the different perspectives brought by each of the panelists today, I'm super excited. I think this is going to be a very lively and interesting discussion. So before we really kind of look into the future, let's first try to figure out kind of where we are right now. Hiroaki, you've been in the technology industry for many years. So when we're looking at artificial intelligence from your perspective, where are we right now in the adoption curve? And where are we in the hype cycle? Are we just in the beginning, or are we somewhere in the middle?
Well, I think we're still in the very beginning of the adaptation cycle. I mean, this current excitement artificial intelligence began about 10 years ago when the deep convolution network, or deep learning, so to speak, and combined with the reinforcement learning, which is really the groundbreaking approach for the machine learning, actually get started. And then get into the practical level in terms of the size of data and then computing power that we can use. So with that, there's a quite substantial penetration into the real world in a very rapidly. And then we come to the stage that we are getting into the much deeper understanding what's going on, and a new set of technology to facilitate that, and also rejuvenate the old AI approach as well, and combined with all the real world sensor system or the big data. And I think coming to the stage that they're getting into this, I think now still in a stage that people start realizing that how powerful this tool could be. And of course, there's an initial hype cycle. People are expect a little bit too much, and then a little bit disappointment. But I think this is a very fundamental breakthrough, and I think we're in still the early stage of the wider penetration of the AI into the society and the industry.
Yeah. So Vivian, I mean, so what's your take? Are we in the trough of disillusionment or the slope of enlightenment? Where are we right now?
Well, it probably depends, on who you're asking right now. I very much agree with the idea that there's enormous untapped potential. Forget what comes next or what inventions might be in store for machine learning. There's a huge untapped potential in artificial intelligence just in integrating it into everyday work styles. At the same time, it is one of the most overhyped technologies I've ever come across. It's powerful, but if you think it's magic, then you're destined to be disappointed. But let's put it in really practical scale. When I got started too long ago for me to feel comfortable mentioning, I did some of my original PhD work was in computational audition, hearing. And the idea of having a speech transcription, for example, being so robust and so reliable that you get it for free in a video chat when we were starting this over 20 years ago is just almost inconceivable. And yet now you log in to any number of streaming media or video services, and a one-time conversation that will never be replicated, no one else never needs to hear, you can see that little transcription happening, whether it's in English or Chinese, right there at the bottom of the screen. And I know that doesn't feel like a flying car, but that is such a huge addition, say, to the life of my family, where we are dealing with hearing loss. It's what a change in someone's life. So again, wildly overhyped, and yet the promise, I don't think, has truly been tapped.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting you say that. I was actually on a different panel for a different event yesterday, talking with the founder of an app that that analyzes how you play basketball and how you shoot the basketball
Sure.
into the hoop. And it was amazing because the founders, they have a technical background. They were all engineers, but they didn't have that much experience in machine learning. And they were actually able to, within 6 months, they were able to create, a minimal viable product for what is basically, this computer vision, AI driven application. But I think, David and Wan Li, both of you guys are really kind of focused on practical applications of artificial intelligence. So so David, let's start with you. So you're focused on trucking. So why trucking, and why trucking now in terms of autonomous driving?
So first of all, autonomous driving has tremendous potential, and we've seen the field evolve over the last 10 years. We since the very beginning, we held the belief that the machine one day should replace humans as drivers in the future. And trucking, the reason we picked trucking as the first vertical to go into are because of the following reason. First of all, it's a tremendously big market. There's a lot of needs in trucking. It's a $600 billion market in the US and China respectively. So there's a lot of benefit that autonomous driving can provide to the trucking market. Secondly, there's a lot of challenges that face in today's trucking market. There's a critical driver shortage, both in China and the US. It's not a job that people love. There's a very high driver turnover. And also, it's a very dangerous job. It's a very boring job. So this is a place where technology can help make lives better for people, for society. And our technology today can actually help millions of drivers out there to make their driving experience better, to help them save fuel, and to make their driving safer. At the same time, you can help save billions of dollars every year for the industry. Those are some of the reasons why we started out in the trucking market.
So I'm curious. So where are you guys right now in terms of actual rollout? I mean, how long do you think it's going to be before autonomous trucking is normalized and kind of mainstream?
From a technology point of view, we've demonstrated the technology can be used to drive a truck across the entire US in under 3 days with no human intervention. And last year, we've transported a truckload of butter from Los Angeles to Philadelphia under 2 days with no human intervention. Now, to apply that technology in a widespread fashion will take years, especially to completely remove drivers, to replace drivers. It might take even longer to do that. So what we've been focusing on is actually applying that technology to help drivers today to make their jobs safer and better. Mm-hmm. So we're already working with largest OEMs and fleets to apply our technology to the situation today. And we've had customers in both China and the US starting to adopt our products this year. And then we're gonna do a broader rollout next year.
Well, that's great.
Thank you, David. It's funny, David, one of the most impassioned arguments, business arguments I've ever heard for autonomous driving was actually made by a bunch of executives at the National Basketball Association. And I was thinking, why do these guys care so much? What does basketball have to do with autonomous driving? And they said, night games in the US are during rush hour, morning rush hour in China. They want them all sitting relaxed in an autonomous car so they can watch, the NBA finals as they go to work every day. Trying to think about, again, this idea that it isn't just the obvious applications of AI, but the implications of them is really worth keeping in mind.
I see.
Yeah, appreciate that comment. So we certainly feel that what we do is important, and it's good to know that we're making a very positive impact on society.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. I mean, I want to talk about touch upon this later as well. Is kind of the amount of change that that society can kind of handle at one time, because we are, I mean, throughout the world we are kind of going through this this period of massive and rapid change, and I think, to be honest, I think a lot of the problems that we see around the world are in part, at least, due to some of this. But Wanli, so I think that you're really kind of focusing on kind of what Vivian pointed out, which is some of these non-obvious applications, in particular, kind of looking at traditional industries. So I mean, so what kinds of projects do you guys invest in, and is there kind of like an example that you can give us of something that's been a really successful implementation or commercialization of artificial intelligence?
Yes. So, for example, the smarter manufacturing, in the old days, the scheduling was done pretty much labor dependent and based on the human experience. And very often, because there are so many last minute change of orders and of volumes, and they have to do this retweak about the scheduling on demand, on the fly. And very often they end up with less optimal, less than perfect, suboptimal arrangement of the scheduling. And today, having this AI available right handy, and they can do this on the fly in the seconds and retweak and adjustment of this scheduling of the productions. And this resulted in a lot of benefit with business impact. For example, the response rate, the fulfillment rates, and also the resilience and the continuity of the production was significantly improved. And recently, one of our portfolio company, we deployed this project based at Guangzhou, and it was actually featured by the Chinese CCTV, the Prime News, on October 18th. So they were able to improve their production efficiency by more than 10%. And this was achieved with zero investment in hardware. What they did is just adopt the AI algorithm together with the data flow and also the production orders. And then this AI engine just cranks the algorithms and then do the last minute adjustment of the scheduling. So many similar use cases beyond the manufacturing, like the agriculture and also logistics. As David mentioned about the trucking industry, obviously the routing and the dispatching of the orders certainly has a lot of opportunity for AI to make difference. And a very interesting observation, if you look at the adoption speed of AI, 20 years ago, 1997, IBM Deep Blue, they beat Kasparov in the chess game. But after that, pretty much not so much hype or follow subsequent applications. And we all know what happened to AlphaGo, right? So why there's such a difference about the adoption speed is because of computation power. And 20 years ago, we didn't have cloud computing. Even a PC was kind of luxury, okay, to many practitioners. But today we have affordable, easily accessible computation resources. And plus, we have digitization with the data as an ingredient, so which significantly accelerates the adoption of AI across all the industries. And this acceleration will continue.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're kind of in a perfect storm for AI adoption, where the technical problems, in a certain sense, so kind of like the mathematics and kind of the computer science, a lot of the big problems have already been solved, and so now it's just a question of figuring out I think, kind of in the entrepreneurial space, what are people willing to pay for? What kinds of applications and use cases? But then I think also kind of in the more in the public sector, how much change are people willing to accept in a short period of time? And I think also, how do we educate people about artificial intelligence a little bit more? But Hiroaki, I wanted to come back to you and kind of ask a bit of a similar question. So when we're looking at artificial intelligence and kind of human machine interfaces, what would you say? What's the biggest challenge? Like, what's the biggest barrier towards adoption or acceptance that you're seeing currently?
Well, I think like the challenge is like how the machine to be able to understand the properly the human intentions and then also the irregularity on the real world. And if you look at all the discussions so far, that's a very significant part is like both David and Wan Lee applied that to the transportation industry, logistics, and also the manufacturing, agriculture, and all those real world issues. Like they're basically applying AI technology to the real world issue, which is rather the open-ended problem as opposed to the initial application, for example, like Google, Facebook did for a recommendation engine or optimization of the search. I mean, that was a purely like data issues. Like that's pretty much on the cyberspace. Now we are getting in AI, applying AI into the real world, which is like a open-ended, much more unexpected thing and happen. Irregularity happens and direct interface with the human in the physical sense as well. And then how the and that's also like broaden the scope of the kind of people who interface with the AI because like in the search engine or SNS, you engage with people who understand the nature of that. And with the real world application, you are interfacing with the individual who is not expecting to commit to the cyberspace, that they are the people living in the real world. And that's actually the kind of expanding really the scope of the people who are directly involved in the AI. Either AI is in the front or in the back backend. So I think that's really the challenge. At the same time, like how we're gonna make AI more explainable, for example, accountable, or to the kind of decision and an action that the AI manipulated in the manufacturing or decision making. So it goes like one of the power of the deep learning or deep reinforcement learning it is the enormous capability of the optimizing things and the learn, but at the same time it's a little bit of the black box. I wouldn't say it's completely black box because there's a lot of technology to crack what's going on behind. But I think like people wants to know why the AI system made that decision or recommendations, how things are rooted that way. And then probably challenges the AI to be able to ask the questions when how the things happened. So I think like a few questions, but I think like those will help AI to get into the further penetration into the real world.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Hiroaki. Yeah, I mean, it's always surprising to me. I think it's surprising to a lot of people, especially, I mean, I don't have an engineering background. When if you ask engineers and computer scientists, so why did this happen? They're like, well, we're actually not so sure.
Yes.
And so there's been a lot of discussion, especially in English language media, around bias in artificial intelligence, whether it's racial profiling, whether it's misgendering or maybe discriminating in terms of gender or other types of in other ways. So I want to throw this out to the entire group. Hiroaki was talking about this black box, and it does seem that there is still, I mean, the promise of artificial intelligence does seem to be that we will at some point be able to create some, maybe this is an exaggeration, some kind of perfectly objective kind of way of creating and understanding information. And right now, artificial intelligence is definitely falling short because it's a technology, and a technology is created by humans, and of course humans are imperfect. So can we ever achieve that vision that I just mentioned? I mean, is it possible to take human bias out of AI decision making? And if yes, how do we get there? And if not, then what are we looking at? And again, I just want to throw that out to the whole group. So please just go ahead.
Yeah, let me start. Like, I think the bias is actually in the data rather than the AI algorithm. AI algorithm is really neutral, agnostic to any of the bias because it take like a data and they get the result. So like, what we actually seeing as AI bias is actually bias in our society, which is made very explicit by the AI algorithm or the whole processing. So I think like, it will be very difficult to get rid of the bias, although a lot of effort has been made in terms of AI ethics and also like algorithm-wise. But I think like a fundamental, cause of the bias lies in the data that we collect. So like that's a reflection of our society, unfortunately. So like, but like of course, like a lot of research going on to be able to detect the bias and correct it, also to be able to explain how things happen. And also like we mentioned the black box, but like it's not just AI, but our human brain is also the black box. Like when you ask people why you made decisions, people might say like, I don't know. I mean, so that's like it's. I think like that's actually reality, but we need to be able to. There's a lot of research going on to be able to have a much better understanding what's going on and then get minimize the repercussions or like minimize the bias or that impact to the society.
I'll follow up on that. It certainly is, I think, the sort of zeitgeist, let's say, of industry and research right now is that the problems of bias in AI very much are driven on the data side. But I think it's worth going even a little bit deeper than that. But it also ties back into some of the issues of promise and the challenge. So one of my companies from a while ago, we're one of the first companies using artificial intelligence in hiring. And, obviously the bias in the United States in hiring, you train on all this historical data. It's just, it becomes very much incorporated in any model you build. But one of the things that it really ingrained into me is that you have to actually understand the problem that you're solving, which is to say, if you don't know how to solve the problem, AI will not solve it for you. It can dramatically change the economics of any solution you might come up with. And that is an incredibly powerful reality. But again, if you don't know, if your hiring practices of your company are such that you never hire women, AI is not going to change that if you train it on all of your hiring history. And, somewhat funnily, after I finished as chief scientist at that company Guild, Amazon tried to hire me as their chief scientist for people. And they were running just such a project, which turned into a bit of a black eye for AI when it was later revealed that that algorithm would not hire women. And I think one of the important things to know here, and I say this as someone that simultaneously studies people and machines, is I don't think that there's any cognitive system of any kind which is unbiased. We could talk about rats or humans or machines. Inevitably, bias is a part. The fundamental definition of AI for me is an autonomous system that makes decisions under uncertainty. If you're uncertain, there's no right answer. There's only the best answer based on your experience. That's what AI is all about. It is actually the responsibility of the humans to understand the problem. That's the creative touch, the exploration of the unknown, and then craft the best possible system to address it. And I think often that is a really missing ingredient. And I'll shut up by offering the following, which is at that very company, Guild, we built this system with these very fancy algorithms. We had this massive database of largely every working professional around the world. And it had all this promise. Everybody loved it. We were the cover of the New York Times, the cover of the Atlantic. And then we did our user research on the recruiters. We're using our tool. And when they opened up a profile in our system, they looked at your name, your school, and your last job. The same thing recruiters have done for 100 years, and they ignored all of the machine learning features that we have built. So, you can build this thing thinking it will solve the problem. But in the end, you really, if you don't understand the problem that you're solving, AI won't help.
So in fact, I believe that if we look at what AI, the best they can do in terms of the unbiasedness, is trying to faithfully reflect what the human beings are acting in the real world. And very often we recognize there's certain bias, like in the racial profiling, in the hiring, for example, and promotions, for instance. So, and that's fundamentally explains why there's such bias or unfairness, for example, exists in the first place. And that existence will also contaminate the training data for any kind of AI. So you cannot expect AI suddenly become super smart and automatically become unbiasedness despite the training data. Training data is biased. So I feel like in order to reduce the human bias, first let's have to reduce the human bias in our physical world, in the social activity, and also in our professional activities.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it really kind of draws out some of the maybe the obvious but not obvious things to say around artificial intelligence, in the sense that, you know, again, it's just I think there's a lot of misplaced expectation over what it should do and what it can do. Whenever I see articles around kind of bias and artificial intelligence, you know, my first thought is, well, yes, it's imperfect. We created it, so of course it's not really going to, you know, it's not going to solve all of our problems overnight. But so the next thing that I wanted to discuss was looking at kind of overall AI adoption. So as I mentioned before, you know, there does seem to be quite a bit of resistance to artificial intelligence, whether that's because of the bias, whether that's because of kind of the black box nature of some of its decision making, or whether it's because people are really kind of nervous or worried about artificial intelligence taking over the world, or maybe just taking their job. So what I'm really curious about is, you know, what is it going to take for us to kind of stop talking about artificial intelligence as artificial intelligence? I mean, we're all using this term. It's a term in kind of popular culture. It's used to sell products and applications and things like that. But you know, what is it going to take for it to be something that's just kind of there in the background, like kind of like electricity? You know, we don't talk about electricity that much. It's not really, you know, this kind of really interesting thing. It's just there in the background. So David, why don't we start with you? I mean, what's the application that's really kind of gonna make AI kind of mainstream?
Sure. So one thing that's interesting about humans is that we are more cognizant about qualitative changes, although quantitative changes happens every day and we just don't see them. So this is particularly the case in the AI space. AI technology has been in existence not for the past 10 years or 20 years. It's been there for the past 50 years. And the advancement in AI are driven by a few factors, you know, as the panelists previously discussed, your computing power, algorithms, big data. So those are some of the major drivers. And we've seen a few significant breakthroughs on algorithm over the past decade. That's why it all of a sudden jumped to the forefront. You know, and those algorithm changes are also driven by the computing power. But these breakthroughs are generational, and you know, and that these areas are, for instance, the advancement in deep learning and all that, you know, happened in consistence with cloud computing, with the significant improvement on computing power. So it brought out this whole set of potential applications that all of a sudden have qualitatively changing our lives. So for instance, in the realm of transportation, which we focus on, the driver assistant technology has been there for decades. You know, advanced emergency brakes, you know, lane departure warnings have been there for a long time. It's just that, over the last 10 years or so, these technologies get dramatically better quantitatively. And they're being adopted dramatically in a wider scale, with especially the wider adoption of electrical vehicles. More and more people are starting to use them, and they're changing people's driving behavior more and more. And these systems can handle more and more scenarios as they get more mature and more widely adopted. And at some point, the changes or the advancement we'll be able to see billions of miles of driving data. And over time, it will, one day become safer than human drivers. And that's the point where we see, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you have this machine that drives better than human. Maybe that's the point where you all of a sudden see this technology come out. That's the driverless vehicle, right? That's the point where people start seeing, wow, this is going to change our society. But really, the adoption or the change did not happen overnight. It happens over the past decades. So I think it's going to be a natural progression in terms of technology development, technology adoption. In every area, transportation, security, medical information, et cetera, in all these areas, we're seeing technology pushing the boundary. At some point, we're going to see how it's going to make a dramatic impact on our lives.
So maybe it's more of a generational thing. So my 8-year-old son, for him, he'll just basically have grown up with it his entire life. So it won't really be a thing to discuss anymore. So we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes remaining. So I wanted to kind of throw out another big question as kind of a way to round out the panel. So Noah Yuval Harari, a historian and author, in his book Homo Deus, hypothesizes that humans will eventually lose their ability to make decisions as artificial intelligence takes over more and more responsibility for our life. Recommending things to us, saying, "Hey, you're deficient in vitamin A. Go eat 500 grams of carrots," or something like that. So I want to throw this out to the group again. Do you agree with that hypothesis? And are there any other depictions of artificial intelligence kind of in the popular literature that you think are perhaps more accurate?
It seems like if I get up on a stage, people have a couple of quick questions. One is, can I predict the stock market? And two is, when will Skynet take over and kill us all? Which is, not a useful understanding. Frankly, either one are not particularly useful understandings of artificial intelligence. And, trying to think about where this goes from here. Actually, I have a fairly, an even deeper concern. The reason I got involved in AI in the first place, or much more specifically machine learning, was actually neurotechnologies. So one of my big areas of research is understanding how you put machines and brains together in interesting ways. In fact, I sit on the boards of a large number of companies trying to come up with machine learning driven technologies that directly interface to the brain for Alzheimer's and autism, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury. And so this idea of, can a system take on so much of who you are that you lose yourself? That was an interesting story when, in the time machine, 150 years ago, when someone wrote about that for the first time, and a legitimate concern, I suppose. But there's so much more going on in the practical spaces that we have to pay attention to. Let me just say, one of my design rules for the kind of AI projects that we launch here at our lab, but particularly for our neurotechnology projects, is a simple one, at least to state, which is, not only should our users be better while they are using the technology, they should be better than where they started when they turn it off again. And this is all the more important when these are systems that are embedded or interfacing with someone's brain. So it's not that I completely dismiss the idea. that we become reliant on AIs making decisions for us. We already do. Who makes a decision about what TikTok video to watch next? Who makes a decision about what stream their social media presents to them? None of us. It's automatic. All the news of AI winners are in the face of a massive growth of technology in this space over 40 years' time. But ultimately, the expression of the power of AI is in what individuals can creatively do with it. When my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, probably one of the most notorious things I personally have ever done, I hacked all of his equipment. It turns out I broke all sorts of US federal laws. And just by dumb luck, we developed one of the first AIs to ever treat diabetes, just because I had a personal connection and I knew enough about brains and biology and machines to make it happen. That is the kind of AI I want us to lean into. It's great to automate away jobs that humans shouldn't be doing. People shouldn't be bent over in a field 16 hours a day. But the real power of AI comes from creative complementarity, the creativity that humans bring, and the astonishing power that such a person can gain when they're able to use these sorts of systems to explore the unknown. So much of what we talk about is driven about automated systems, and that's meaningful also. But imagine your company full of crazy mad scientists like me, able to take problems that people don't understand and make progress on them as a team of one or a small team to really break in and make a huge shift in a space. That's what excites me and always has about artificial intelligence. Not Skynet as much as I'm a sci-fi nerd. It's the real power that it brings to people.
So more of an AlphaGo and less of a Terminator.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I fully agree. I mean, this is like we somewhat depend on technology anyway, and it's more convenient. I think we're more increasingly dependent. At the same time, I think we have like quite a positive side on the AI. And one of the projects I'm running right now is to have AI to make a major scientific discoveries, like AI scientists, so to speak. And then, we're making a lot of progress on that. And then in the future, I would predict like artificial intelligence will be able to help us accelerate the science in a big way, science and technology in a big way. That should be able to, help us solve problem much faster and then create something more, very important in the future. And that actually will, have a lot of implication into the medical diagnosis and the therapeutic implications, and then also like a global climate issues as well. So like every technology has like a two-sided sword. I mean, we have an increasing reliance because it's so convenient, so useful, and that's happening. Like how many people just looking at the mobile phone in any communication, any behavior, right? So like we have an increasing reliance and dependence on that. At the same time, we have a lot of a positive side on AI. I think like it would be great to be able to push more on the positive side and be able to accelerate our civilizations and our science, or the industry in a new height.
That's great. So Wan Li, we have about a little bit less than 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so I actually disagree with what the author Harari, his assertion. I believe the ability to make a decision will be reinforced with the AI being in place. Even take the example of recommendation or TikTok or social media, for example. When they recommend the news or the short video to me, I still have the chance to delay it or decline it or accept it. So in a way, at the end of the day, so who makes the judgment call is our human beings. So I guess to that point, this AI is this augmentation of intelligence. It's augmentation rather than substitution. So in a way, they help us to do the information retrieval more efficiently. Because today with all the fragmented field world with fragmented time, and we cannot exhaust all of the internet or the information sources. So the AI definitely can help us to do a pre-screening, certain filtering, and the distilling of the raw information, raw material, and in order to present to us as a human beings, present to us the viable options. And it's still to the human beings to make the final say about which one I want to take, which one I do not like. So I feel like the decision ability to make decision is still with the human beings, and the AI is still assistant.
Sorry, Wan Li, I have to cut you off there. We're at the end of this this fantastic session. Thank you so much again to the panelists for interesting discussion.